Under the neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip, inside one of the city's most secure casinos, $50 million vanished without a single gun drawn or alarm triggered. Surveillance cameras recorded nothing suspicious. Vault doors remained sealed. Yet in less than 72 hours, an anonymous hacker used nothing more than a laptop and a deep understanding of the casino's network to pull off one of the most sophisticated heists in history. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. We love seeing where viewers are watching from. Ethan Morales was drowning in debt. At 29 years old, he sat in a studio apartment in Seattle that smelled like instant ramen and desperation. The eviction notice on his door was dated 3 weeks ago. His phone had been shut off for non-payment. His internet connection, ironically the only utility he'd managed to keep active, was about to be cut off too. His laptop, a refurbished ThinkPad held together with duct tape and hope, was the only thing of value he owned. The apartment was in the University District, a neighborhood filled with students who had futures. Ethan used to be one of them. Now he was just the guy in 3B who everyone avoided in the hallway. He dropped out of a cybersecurity master's program at University of Washington 2 years earlier. Not because he wasn't smart enough. He was brilliant. Too brilliant, some said. He'd been caught hacking into the university's grading system in November 2021, not to change his grades or anyone else's, just to prove he could, just to expose how laughably weak their security was. The university didn't see it that way. They expelled him and reported him to local authorities. No charges were filed, but the damage was done. His academic career was over. Before the expulsion, Ethan had been on a path to success. He'd grown up in Portland, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He'd been the kid who fixed neighbors' computers for cash, the teenager who taught himself to code by watching YouTube videos, the young man who'd gotten a full scholarship to community college and then transferred to UW. He was supposed to be the success story, the one who made it out. After the expulsion, he'd scrambled to find work. His resume was strong. He had real-world experience from an internship at PaySecure, a payment processing firm that handled transactions for hotels, restaurants, and casinos across the western United States. The job had paid decently. The work was boring but stable. He'd been there for 8 months in 2020. That internship gave him something invaluable: access and knowledge. He learned how casino financial systems communicated with each other and with banks, how money moved from player accounts to central servers to external payment processors, how transactions were verified, logged, and reconciled, how security protocols were implemented to prevent fraud, and more importantly, where the gaps were. Ethan had always been the type to notice gaps, the loose thread you could pull to unravel the whole sweater. The door left slightly ajar, the password written on a Post-it note. He saw vulnerabilities everywhere. At PaySecure, he documented everything: system architecture diagrams, database schemas, API endpoints, login credentials that employees shared freely in Slack channels, network topology maps showing how different casino systems connected. He told himself it was just professional knowledge, that keeping detailed notes was what good engineers did. But deep down, he knew why he was saving it. When PaySecure let him go after the university incident became public, Ethan had walked out with a thumb drive containing 2 years of documentation. No one asked him to return it. No one even knew it existed. That was in February 2022. Now it was March 2023, and Ethan was 3 months behind on rent. His student loans had ballooned to $87,000 with interest. His bank account held $43. He'd applied to over 200 jobs, tech companies, startups, help desk positions. Nothing. No one wanted to hire a cybersecurity professional with an arrest record and no degree. The arrest had happened in 2019, during his senior year at UW. He'd been young and stupid. A data breach at a retail chain called Northwest Electronics. He'd stolen 50,000 credit card numbers and sold them on a dark web marketplace for $15,000. He'd thought he was untraceable. He'd used Tor. He'd used VPNs. He'd done everything right. The FBI traced him anyway. It took them 6 months, but they found him. Special Agent Lisa Chen had knocked on his dorm room door at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. She'd been calm, professional, almost sympathetic. She told him he had two choices: cooperate and take a plea deal, or fight it and face federal charges. Ethan had taken the deal: probation, community service, restitution payments he was still making, a permanent stain on his record. That was supposed to be the end of his criminal career. He was supposed to learn his lesson, graduate, get a real job, pay his dues to society, build a normal life. But normal life required money, and money was something Ethan didn't have. His mother called every few weeks. She asked if he was eating, if he was okay, if he needed help. He lied every time, said he was fine, said he had job interviews lined up, said things were looking up. He couldn't tell her the truth, that he was about to be homeless, that he'd failed, that everything she'd sacrificed for him had been wasted. So on a cold night in March, sitting in his dark apartment with the heat shut off and his stomach empty, Ethan opened his laptop and made a decision that would change everything. He pulled up the files from his PaySecure days. He reviewed the casino documentation he'd saved. He looked at the network diagrams, the security protocols, the vulnerabilities he'd noticed but never exploited. He was going to rob a casino, not with a gun, not with a mask, with code. It was either that or give up completely. And Ethan Morales had never been good at giving up. Ethan spent the first month just watching. He chose his target with the same care a bank robber might choose a vault. Not the biggest casino, not the most famous, but one with the right combination of factors: high cash flow, outdated security, and most importantly, a connection to PaySecure. The Mirage Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas fit perfectly. A massive complex with 3,000 hotel rooms, 150 table games, 2,000 slot machines, and a daily cash flow in the tens of millions. It wasn't the Bellagio or the Wynn, but it was big enough to have serious money moving through its systems every single day. More importantly, Mirage Bay used PaySecure for payment processing. Ethan knew their systems intimately. He'd helped configure them during his internship. He started with open source intelligence gathering, OSINT, as it was called in the security world, information that was publicly available but often overlooked. He searched public records, LinkedIn profiles of Mirage Bay employees. He found the IT director, the network administrators, the security team. He studied their backgrounds, their certifications, their career histories. He looked for weaknesses in the human layer. He found job postings on Indeed and Glassdoor that revealed what software the casino used: Windows Server 2016, Cisco networking equipment, Oracle databases, Dell servers, all standard enterprise technology, but knowing the exact versions helped. He searched for vendor contracts in public procurement databases. He found that Mirage Bay had hired a company called Temp Control Systems to manage their HVAC equipment. That was useful information. Then he found gold, a PDF buried on page 7 of a Google search. It was a security audit from 2021 conducted by a firm called CyberShield Consulting. The document was supposed to be confidential, internal use only. But someone at Mirage Bay had misconfigured a file server, making the PDF publicly accessible. Ethan downloaded it immediately. Then he reported the misconfiguration anonymously so the casino would fix it and no one else would find the document. He wasn't trying to help them. He just didn't want competition. The security audit was a goldmine. It outlined the casino's entire network architecture, where the firewalls were positioned, what security tools they used, which systems had passed vulnerability scans and which had failed. Ethan studied that document for days. He took notes, drew diagrams, memorized network IP ranges. He learned that Mirage Bay's network was segmented into separate zones: public Wi-Fi for guests, internal Wi-Fi for staff, administrative networks for accounting and surveillance, and the crown jewel, the financial transaction servers where all the money lived. The zones were supposed to be isolated from each other, protected by firewalls and intrusion detection systems, air-gapped so that a breach in one zone couldn't spread to another. But Ethan knew something most people didn't. Perfect network segmentation was a myth, a fairy tale that security consultants sold to executives who didn't understand technology. There were always connections, always exceptions made for convenience, always gaps. He just needed to find one. In early April, he started scanning Mirage Bay's public IP ranges from his apartment. He used tools like Nmap and Mascan, but configured them to run slowly, one packet every few seconds. Quiet enough that intrusion detection systems would miss it. Patient enough that it would take weeks to complete. He discovered dozens of devices responding on the public internet, security cameras with web interfaces, printers with management portals, environmental monitoring systems, even a Coke vending machine with an internet connection so the vendor could track inventory remotely. Each device was a potential entry point, but most were locked down reasonably well. Default credentials had been changed. Unnecessary services had been disabled. Someone at Mirage Bay knew what they were doing, but then Ethan found something beautiful. An HVAC controller with a web interface. HVAC systems, the heating and cooling equipment that kept large buildings comfortable, had become smart in recent years. They connected to the internet so maintenance companies could monitor temperature, adjust settings, and diagnose problems remotely. It was convenient, efficient, cost-effective. It was also a massive security risk. Ethan accessed the HVAC controller's login page. It was a device made by Temp Control Systems, the same vendor he'd seen in the procurement records. The interface was basic: username and password fields, a Remember Me checkbox, a corporate logo. He tried the default credentials. Username, admin. Password, admin. The screen changed. He was in. Ethan sat back in his chair, heart pounding. The HVAC system wasn't just connected to the internet. It was connected to Mirage Bay's internal network. Someone during installation had made a catastrophic mistake. Instead of isolating the HVAC controller on its own restricted VLAN, they'd plugged it directly into the administrative network to make it easier for IT staff to access. It was a textbook security violation, the kind of mistake that got taught in cybersecurity classes as an example of what not to do. But it happened all the time in the real world. Convenience always won over security. This was the backdoor Ethan needed. Over the next 2 weeks, he moved carefully. He didn't want to trigger any alarms. He installed a persistent backdoor on the HVAC controller, a small piece of code that would survive reboots and software updates. It gave him permanent access. He used the HVAC controller as a pivot point to scan the internal network. He discovered file servers, employee workstations, printer queues full of documents that should have been confidential. Every device had an IP address. Every device revealed something about the network topology. Every night, Ethan would log in from his apartment in Seattle and explore a little more. He felt like a ghost moving through the casino's digital infrastructure. He could see everything: security camera feeds, employee schedules, financial reports, email servers. No one knew he was there. He documented everything in encrypted files on his laptop. He built a complete map of Mirage Bay's network. He knew where the firewalls were positioned. He knew which systems talked to which. He knew where the crown jewels lived, the financial transaction servers. But he also knew he couldn't just log into those servers and start transferring money. That would trigger every alarm system the casino had. He needed something more sophisticated, more subtle. He needed to escalate his privileges from a random HVAC controller to a domain administrator, and that meant stealing credentials from real employees. By late April, Ethan had identified his targets: network administrators with elevated privileges, accounting staff who had access to financial systems, security personnel who could disable monitoring tools. Now came the hard part: social engineering. Ethan's next challenge was escalation. He had access to low-level systems through the HVAC backdoor, but the financial servers required administrator credentials he didn't have. He couldn't brute force passwords. That would trigger lockout policies. He couldn't exploit software vulnerabilities. Modern systems were too well patched. He needed to steal credentials directly from employees, and the easiest way to do that was to trick them into handing them over. He started with reconnaissance. He identified a network administrator named Derek Walsh. Derek was 34, had worked at Mirage Bay for 6 years, and from his LinkedIn profile, seemed frustrated with his job. He posted complaints about management, about outdated systems, about being overworked and underpaid. Perfect. Ethan created a fake LinkedIn profile. He used a stock photo of a middle-aged man in a suit, made up a background as an IT recruiter for a major tech company in San Francisco, sent connection requests to hundreds of people in the Las Vegas tech scene to make the profile look legitimate. Then he reached out to Derek, sent a friendly message saying he'd found Derek's profile interesting and wondered if he'd be open to discussing career opportunities. The salary ranges he mentioned were double what Derek was making at Mirage Bay. Derek responded within hours. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan built rapport. They messaged back and forth. He asked about Derek's current role, his frustrations, his career goals. He was sympathetic, understanding. He offered advice on how to position himself for better opportunities. He never asked for anything suspicious, never pushed too hard, just played the role of a helpful recruiter trying to fill positions. Then in early May, Ethan made his move. He sent Derek an email from a spoofed address that looked like it came from Mirage Bay's IT department. The subject line read, "Urgent, password reset required." The email explained that there had been a security incident, that all administrative passwords needed to be reset immediately. That failure to comply within 24 hours would result in account lockout. The email included a link to a password reset portal. The link led to a fake website Ethan had built. It looked identical to Mirage Bay's real internal portal. Same logo, same layout, same colors. Derek clicked the link. He entered his username and current password. Then he created a new password. Ethan captured everything. With Derek's credentials, Ethan logged into Mirage Bay's internal systems as a legitimate administrator. He could now see things that had been hidden before: employee records, financial databases, transaction logs, email archives. But he still wasn't invisible. Network logs recorded everything. Every login, every file access, every command executed. If security analysts reviewed those logs, they'd see Derek's account logging in from Seattle. That would trigger an investigation within hours. Ethan needed to hide his tracks. He set up an elaborate proxy network. He used compromised computers across the world as relay points: a server in Moscow, a business computer in Sao Paulo, a university network in Bangkok, a government office in Romania that had been hacked months earlier by someone else. Each hop made it harder to trace back to Seattle. By the time his connection reached Mirage Bay, it looked like it was coming from dozens of different places. He also installed keyloggers on several administrator workstations inside Mirage Bay's network. These were pieces of malware that recorded every keystroke. They captured passwords, security tokens, two-factor authentication codes. Everything an administrator typed. Within 2 weeks, Ethan had collected credentials for 8 different administrators, some from IT, some from accounting, some from security. Each gave him access to different parts of the network. He used these credentials carefully. He'd log in during normal business hours when the real employees were working. He'd mimic their behavior patterns, access the same files they usually accessed, run the same commands they usually ran. He was impersonating them digitally, wearing their identities like masks. By mid-May, Ethan had escalated to domain administrator, the highest level of privilege in a Windows network. He could access any system, read any file, modify any setting, create new accounts, disable security tools. He was God in Mirage Bay's digital world, and no one knew he existed. Now came the hardest part. He needed to figure out how to steal $50 million without getting caught. The financial transaction servers were heavily monitored. Every large transfer required multiple approvals. Every unusual pattern triggered alerts that went to the Security Operations Center. Ethan spent days studying how the casino processed money. He learned about player accounts, how people deposited cash at the cage and received electronic chips, how those chips were tracked across table games and slot machines, how winnings were converted back to cash or wire transfers. He learned about vendor payments, how the casino paid suppliers for food, liquor, equipment, services, how those payments were initiated in the accounting system, approved by managers, and executed by the financial team. He learned about promotional disbursements, how the casino paid out bonuses to high rollers, comp rooms, free meals, cash incentives. The system was complex, dozens of moving parts, multiple layers of verification, automatic fraud detection algorithms that looked for anomalies. But Ethan noticed something. Small transactions under $5,000 had fewer security controls. They were considered low risk, approved automatically, logged but rarely reviewed unless someone specifically went looking. That was his opening. Not one big theft, but thousands of small ones. He started writing code, a custom script in Python that would interface with Mirage Bay's financial systems. It would generate thousands of legitimate-looking transactions. Player payouts to fake accounts, vendor payments to shell companies, bonus disbursements to non-existent VIP members. Each transaction would be small enough to slip under the radar, but together they'd add up to $50 million. Ethan tested his script on a virtual machine in his apartment. He'd set up a simulated version of Mirage Bay's network environment based on the documentation he'd stolen. He ran the code, watched as fake transactions appeared in fake databases. The script worked perfectly. It generated transactions at a rate that seemed natural. Not too fast, not too slow, just normal casino business. But running it for real was terrifying. Once he initiated the heist, there would be no turning back. The casino would notice eventually. The FBI would get involved. Federal charges, prison time. His life completely over. Ethan thought about walking away. He still could. Just delete everything. Wipe his laptop. Pretend none of this had happened. Keep living in poverty, but at least stay free. But then he looked around his apartment, at the eviction notice, at the empty refrigerator, at the stack of past due bills on the counter. What kind of life was this? What kind of freedom was this? He opened his laptop and pulled up the script. He configured the parameters. Destination cryptocurrency wallets, transaction amounts, timing intervals. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. His heart hammered in his chest. He took a deep breath, and he hit enter. On July 15, 2023, at 11:47 p.m. Pacific Time, Ethan Morales initiated the biggest digital heist in casino history. He sat in his apartment in Seattle, bathed in the glow of his laptop screen. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, his entire body was tense with fear and adrenaline. The script began executing on Mirage Bay's financial servers 1,200 miles away. The first transactions appeared in the logs within seconds. $3,200 transferred to a cryptocurrency wallet registered in Hong Kong. $4,800 to an account in Singapore. $2,900 to Malta. $3,150 to Cyprus. Each transaction looked legitimate. A player payout here, a vendor payment there, a promotional bonus, a comp settlement. Ethan had structured the heist to take 48 hours, slow enough to avoid triggering velocity alerts that monitored transaction frequency, fast enough to complete before pattern recognition algorithms noticed the anomalies. He'd created 47 different cryptocurrency wallets, each registered under a fake identity using stolen credentials from dark web marketplaces. The stolen funds would flow into these wallets, then immediately tumble through mixing services that made them impossible to trace. The first hour went smoothly. $2.3 million moved out of Mirage Bay's accounts in 800 separate transactions. Ethan watched the numbers climb on his screen. His monitoring dashboard showed every transaction, every confirmation, every successful transfer. His heart was pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. This was real. This was actually happening. By hour 6, he'd stolen $8 million. No alarms, no response from casino security. The automated fraud detection system hadn't flagged anything. His script was working exactly as designed. But Ethan couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything except watch the screen. He'd set up alerts on his phone that would notify him immediately if anything went wrong, if security started investigating, if his access was revoked, if the casino shut down the financial servers. He kept multiple backup plans ready. If they detected him before he hit $50 million, he'd trigger a kill switch that would wipe his access logs and destroy his backdoors. He'd abandon the remaining money and run, but nothing happened. The casino was oblivious. By morning on July 16th, $15 million was gone. The money sat in cryptocurrency wallets scattered across exchanges in different countries. Ethan had already begun the laundering process, moving funds through mixing services, converting between different cryptocurrencies, breaking large amounts into smaller chunks. He finally allowed himself to believe it might actually work. He made coffee for the first time in 12 hours, ate a granola bar, checked the cryptocurrency wallets on his phone. The money was there, real, tangible. He could stop right now, walk away with $15 million, That was more money than he'd ever dreamed of having, more than enough to pay his debts, help his mother, and disappear to a country with no extradition treaty. But greed is a powerful drug, and Ethan had tasted it. He let the script run. By early afternoon on July 16th, $28 million had been stolen. The script was running ahead of schedule. At this rate, he'd hit $50 million by midnight instead of the planned 48-hour window. Ethan started to relax, started to plan his exit. He'd already packed a bag with clothes, cash, and a fake ID he'd purchased on the dark web. He'd booked a flight to Mexico City under a false name. From there, he'd travel overland to South America, eventually ending up in a country that didn't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. He'd researched this carefully. Paraguay, Ecuador, certain parts of Brazil, places where money talked louder than extradition treaties. But then, at 4:37 p.m., everything changed. Ethan's monitoring software detected unusual activity on Mirage Bay's network. Multiple administrators logging in simultaneously. Database queries running against the financial transaction logs. Someone was running forensic tools. Security had noticed something was wrong. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He stared at the screen, watching the activity logs in real time. They were searching, investigating, trying to figure out what was happening. He had two choices: shut down now and run with $31 million, or keep going and hope they couldn't stop him fast enough. He looked at the numbers. $31 million stolen, $19 million to go. He'd come this far, planned this perfectly. He wasn't going to stop now. He kept the script running, but he also activated his defensive measures. He'd prepared for this moment. He'd installed multiple backdoors throughout Mirage Bay's network. Hidden accounts, alternate access paths. When security started closing doors, he'd open new ones. For the next 6 hours, Ethan fought a digital war. The casino's security team was hunting him. They were running network scans, checking logs, resetting passwords, disabling accounts. But Ethan was always 2 steps ahead. When they disabled Derek's account, he switched to another administrator. When they blocked his IP addresses, he rerouted through different proxies. When they shut down one access path, he used a backdoor they hadn't found yet. His script continued generating transactions. $35 million, $40 million, $45 million. The security team was getting closer. They'd identified some of his techniques. They were calling in outside experts. Ethan could see them discussing it in an internal chat system he'd compromised. But they were too slow. They were following procedures, getting approvals, coordinating with different departments. All the bureaucracy that slowed down large organizations. Ethan was one person, fast, decisive, ruthless. At 11:52 p.m. on July 16th, exactly 48 hours and 5 minutes after he'd started, Ethan's script completed its final transaction. $50,000 stolen. The money was spread across 47 cryptocurrency wallets, already being tumbled through mixing services, already being converted and moved through exchanges. Within hours, it would be effectively untraceable. Ethan shut down his laptop. He pulled the battery. He grabbed his bag. He walked out of his apartment and didn't look back. 2 hours later, he was on a bus to Portland. By dawn, he'd crossed into Canada using a fake passport. By the end of the week, he was in Mexico City. He'd actually pulled it off. He'd robbed one of the most secure casinos in Las Vegas without setting foot inside, without touching a single dollar bill, using nothing but code and a laptop. He felt like he might throw up, or laugh, or cry, maybe all three. But celebration would have to wait. Now came the even harder part, staying free. The Mirage Bay Casino discovered the full extent of the breach on the morning of July 17th. Director of Security James Holloway arrived at work at 7 a.m. to find his entire team in crisis mode. Analysts crowded around computer screens. Phone calls with frantic voices echoed through the Security Operations Center. Something catastrophic had happened overnight. The financial team had noticed discrepancies during their morning reconciliation. Thousands of transactions that didn't match player accounts. Vendor payments to companies that didn't exist. Promotional disbursements to fake VIP members. When they tallied everything up, the number was staggering. $50 million missing. Holloway felt his stomach drop. In 22 years of casino security, he'd never seen anything like this. Robberies happened, card counters got caught, employee theft was a constant problem. But $50 million disappearing overnight? That was unprecedented. He immediately locked down all financial systems, shut down transaction processing, froze player accounts. Then he called the FBI. Special Agent Lisa Chen from the Cybercrime Division arrived that afternoon. She was 34, sharp-eyed, and had spent 6 years hunting hackers for the Bureau. She'd investigated casino hacks before, but nothing approaching this scale. The casino's IT team walked her through what they knew. The breach had somehow originated from within their internal network. The hacker had used legitimate administrator credentials. The transactions had been designed to mimic normal casino operations so perfectly that automated fraud detection systems hadn't caught them until it was too late. Chen asked to see the network logs. She spent hours reviewing access records, trying to piece together what had happened. She found Derek Walsh's credentials being used to access financial systems from 47 different IP addresses across the world over a 48-hour period. They brought Derek in for questioning. He sat in a windowless conference room, sweating, terrified. He insisted he'd never accessed those systems, that his account must have been compromised, that he didn't know how it happened. Chen believed him. This wasn't an inside job. This was an external attacker with sophisticated technical skills. She assembled a task force, FBI cyber agents, Secret Service financial crimes investigators, forensic analysts from the Bureau's Digital Evidence Lab. They set up a command center at Mirage Bay and began systematically tearing apart the network. What they found was both impressive and terrifying. The hacker had been inside the network for months. He'd installed backdoors on dozens of systems. He'd stolen credentials from multiple employees using phishing and keyloggers. He'd mapped the entire infrastructure, identifying every vulnerability. He'd studied the financial systems until he understood them better than the people who built them. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't some script kiddie getting lucky. This was planned, methodical, professional. Chen pulled all the transaction logs and started analyzing patterns. The stolen funds had flowed into cryptocurrency wallets registered in tax havens and jurisdictions with weak financial regulations. From there, they'd been immediately moved into mixing services, also called tumblers, which broke the money into thousands of tiny pieces and reassembled it in different wallets. This process made the cryptocurrency nearly impossible to trace. Tracing cryptocurrency wasn't impossible, but it was incredibly difficult. It required international cooperation. Subpoenas to foreign companies that often didn't respond. Court orders in countries that didn't recognize U.S. legal authority. Months or years of painstaking work with no guarantee of success. But Chen found something else, a mistake the hacker had made. One single mistake in months of perfect execution. One of the phishing emails sent to Derek had originated from a Seattle IP address. It had only been exposed for 3 seconds before routing through the hacker's proxy network, but it was there in the logs. Chen pulled records from the ISP, a company called Wavelength Communications. The IP address belonged to an apartment complex in the University District, Building 3, Unit B. She sent agents to Seattle immediately. By the time FBI agents arrived at the apartment complex on July 20th, 3 days after the heist, Ethan Morales was long gone. They found his studio apartment empty. The walls were bare. The only furniture left was a cheap futon with stains on it and a folding table with scratches. No laptop, no electronics, no papers, no evidence. The apartment had been wiped clean, professionally clean. Not just tidied up, but sanitized. The kind of cleaning someone does when they know forensic teams are coming. The landlord, a tired woman in her 60s named Margaret, told agents that Ethan had moved out on the morning of July 17th. He'd shown up with cash to pay his 3 months of back rent. Then he'd loaded boxes into an old Honda Civic and driven away. She said he'd seemed nervous but polite, thanked her for being patient with him. Agents canvassed the building. A neighbor in 3C, a college student named Amy, said she'd seen Ethan carrying boxes to his car around 6 a.m. Said he'd made multiple trips. Said the car had been packed completely full. She'd asked if he was moving. He'd said yes, that he'd gotten a job in another city. Another neighbor said Ethan had always been quiet, kept to himself. Seemed like a nice guy who'd fallen on hard times. Chen ran Ethan's background through every database available. She found the cybersecurity dropout from University of Washington, the expulsion in 2021 for hacking, the previous arrest in 2019 for credit card fraud, the internship at PaySecure from 2020 to 2021. Everything clicked into place. Ethan had worked at PaySecure. He'd learned casino payment systems. He'd been caught hacking before. He had the skills. He had the knowledge. He had the motive. And now he had $50 million. Chen put out alerts to every airport, train station, bus depot, and border crossing on the West Coast. She sent Ethan's photo and details to TSA, Customs and Border Protection, and local police departments. But Ethan's name didn't appear anywhere. No flight bookings, no hotel reservations, no credit card usage, no ATM withdrawals, no cell phone pings. He'd vanished completely. Chen knew what that meant. He'd planned his escape as carefully as he'd planned the heist. He probably had fake IDs, multiple identities, prepaid debit cards loaded with cash, burner phones, everything he needed to disappear. She interviewed Ethan's mother, Susan Morales, at her home in Portland. Susan was a nurse in her 50s who looked 10 years older from stress. She broke down crying when Chen explained why they were looking for her son. She said she hadn't heard from Ethan in almost 2 months, that he'd been struggling with money and depression, that she'd offered to help but he'd refused, that she'd been worried about him but didn't know what to do. She asked if Ethan was in danger, if he was hurt, if he was alive. Chen couldn't answer those questions honestly. She said they just needed to talk to him, that he wasn't in immediate danger as far as they knew. Susan gave Chen access to Ethan's childhood bedroom. Agents searched it thoroughly. They found old computers, school projects, photos from happier times, but nothing useful to the investigation. The investigation continued for months. Forensic analysts traced the cryptocurrency transactions through dozens of mixing services and exchanges. They identified patterns and connection points, but the trail always went cold at exchanges in countries that refused to cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. Chen contacted her counterparts in Paraguay, Ecuador, Panama, and other countries known for harboring fugitives. She sent Interpol notices. She worked with the State Department to pressure foreign governments, but no one had seen Ethan Morales, or if they had, they weren't saying. By December 2023, 5 months after the heist, the investigation had stalled. The FBI had identified their suspect. They had evidence of the hack. They had a clear picture of how it happened, but they didn't have Ethan, and without him, they couldn't recover the money. The Mirage Bay Casino's insurance covered $30 million of the loss, but that left $20 million unaccounted for, not including legal fees, investigation costs, and the damage to the casino's reputation. Customer confidence dropped. High rollers stopped coming. Regulators from the Nevada Gaming Commission launched their own investigation into the casino's security practices. Executives were fired. The CEO resigned under pressure. Stock prices for the parent company plummeted. The breach became a case study. Security conferences used it as an example of what happens when networks aren't properly segmented, when default credentials aren't changed, when employees aren't trained to recognize phishing, when convenience is prioritized over security. The Nevada Gaming Commission implemented sweeping new cybersecurity requirements for all casinos in the state. Mandatory penetration testing, regular security audits, network segmentation standards, employee training programs. The HVAC backdoor became legendary in security circles. It had a name now, the temp control exploit. Vendors scrambled to patch vulnerabilities. Organizations across every industry checked their HVAC systems, their vending machines, their smart devices. Ethan Morales had exposed a fundamental flaw in how modern buildings were secured, and the entire industry had to adapt. But Ethan himself remained a ghost. Chen kept his case file on her desk. She reviewed it every week, checked for updates, looked for any trace of him. Months turned into a year, then a year and a half. The trail stayed cold. 2 years after the Mirage Bay heist, in August 2025, Agent Lisa Chen was working late in her office when her phone rang. It was the FBI's cybercrime hotline. An anonymous tip had come through, someone claiming to have information about Ethan Morales. Chen grabbed a pen. The operator explained that the caller had used a voice distortion app. Couldn't be traced. but they'd provided specific details about cryptocurrency transactions linked to the heist. The caller had mentioned purchases in Eastern Europe, luxury apartments, high-end vehicles, all paid for in cryptocurrency that could be traced back, through many layers, to the Mirage Bay theft. Chen hung up and immediately started investigating. She pulled transaction records from blockchain analysis firms. She worked with contacts at cryptocurrency exchanges. She followed the digital breadcrumbs. And she found something remarkable. In Sofia, Bulgaria, someone had purchased a luxury apartment for $800,000 in cash in October 2023, just 3 months after the heist. The buyer was listed as a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. But when Chen traced the company's cryptocurrency transactions, she found connections to wallets that had received funds from Mirage Bay. In Prague, someone had bought a Mercedes S-Class for $120,000 in December 2023. Again, paid in cryptocurrency. Again, traceable back to the heist. In Bucharest, someone was paying $5,000 per month for a private office space. The payments came from the same network of shell companies and cryptocurrency wallets. Someone was living large in Eastern Europe, and Chen was willing to bet everything that someone was Ethan Morales. She contacted Interpol. She worked with agents from Europol. She coordinated with police in Bulgaria, Czech Republic, and Romania. They started surveillance on the properties connected to the suspicious transactions. It was delicate work. If Ethan suspected he was being watched, he'd disappear again. They needed to catch him physically, in person, before he could run. In September 2025, Romanian police photographed a man entering the Bucharest office space. The photo was taken from 200 meters away, through a telephoto lens. The quality wasn't great, but it was good enough. Chen ran the image through facial recognition software. The system analyzed bone structure, eye spacing, facial proportions. It compared the photo to Ethan's driver's license picture from 2022. 87% match. It was him. After 2 years, they'd found him. Chen worked with Romanian prosecutors to prepare an extradition request. The process was complex, required cooperation between multiple agencies, required evidence that would satisfy Romanian courts. She coordinated with local police to maintain surveillance. They photographed Ethan coming and going from the office. They tracked his movements. They identified the apartment where he was staying. Chen booked a flight to Bucharest. She was going to be there when they arrested him. She wanted to look him in the eye, to ask him why, to understand what drove someone to risk everything for money. But 3 days before her flight, on October the 2nd, 2025, Ethan disappeared. The office space in Bucharest was abandoned, completely cleaned out. The apartment he'd been staying in was empty. The Mercedes in Prague was found parked at the airport with the keys in the ignition. He was gone. Again. Chen stood in the empty Bucharest office, feeling the weight of failure. They'd been so close to ending this. She suspected a leak. Someone inside Romanian law enforcement or Interpol must have tipped him off. Someone had been paid. Cryptocurrency made corruption easy. Untraceable payments for inside information. She launched an internal investigation but found nothing conclusive. Whoever had warned Ethan was careful, professional. By November 2025, Ethan's trail had gone cold yet again. Chen returned to Washington, defeated. She'd spent 2 years chasing him, had gotten close twice, and twice he'd slipped away. She wondered if she'd ever catch him, or if Ethan Morales would become one of those legendary criminals who simply vanished, who lived out their lives in comfortable anonymity while investigators grew old searching. Then on November 15, 2025, something extraordinary happened. Chen received an encrypted email. The sender was anonymous, routed through multiple proxy servers and the Tor network. The subject line read, "You're looking in the wrong places." Chen opened it on a secure terminal, scanning it for malware first. Clean. The email contained a single sentence and an attachment. The sentence read, "Some people steal because they're greedy. Some steal because they're desperate. Learn the difference." The attachment was a PDF. 47 pages. Chen opened it carefully. Inside was a detailed breakdown of financial crimes at 3 different casinos. Not Mirage Bay, different properties. The document outlined an embezzlement scheme that had been running for 8 years. 5 casino employees working together, pit bosses, accounting staff, security personnel. They'd stolen over $3 million in small amounts over nearly a decade, skimming from high roller accounts, manipulating payout records, creating ghost employees. The PDF included everything needed for prosecution: bank records showing suspicious deposits, wire transfers to offshore accounts, encrypted chat logs between the conspirators, video evidence from security cameras showing coordination. At the end of the document was a single paragraph. These people have good jobs, good salaries, benefits, pensions. They steal because they're greedy, because they can, because they think they're smarter than everyone else. I stole because I was starving, because I had no other options, because the system failed me. We're not the same. Chen stared at the screen for a long time. This was Ethan. It had to be. He was reaching out. Not to confess, not to surrender, but to draw a distinction, to make her understand that he saw himself differently from common criminals. He'd stolen $50 million, yes, but in his mind, he'd done it out of desperation, not greed. And now he was exposing others who'd stolen out of pure avarice. Chen didn't know how to feel. Impressed? Angry? Confused? She forwarded the document to the appropriate field offices. The investigations would take months, but the evidence was solid. Convictions would follow. Careers would be destroyed. Justice would be served, but Ethan would remain free. Chen composed a reply to the encrypted email, knowing it would likely bounce. "Where are you?" she wrote. "Why did you send this?" She waited. Days, weeks, no response. 3 months after receiving Ethan's email, in February 2026, Lisa Chen was attending a cybersecurity conference in Miami when she noticed something in the news. A small nonprofit organization called Code for Change had been featured in a Seattle newspaper. The article described how the organization was providing free coding education to low-income students, scholarships to boot camps, mentorship programs, job placement assistance. What caught Chen's attention was the funding source. The organization was supported entirely by anonymous cryptocurrency donations, millions of dollars worth. The article noted that the donors' identities were unknown, but the money was having a real impact. Dozens of students from disadvantaged backgrounds had learned valuable skills. Many had gotten jobs in tech. Some had gone on to college. The program was expanding to other cities. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. She pulled financial records for Code for Change. The organization was legitimate, properly registered as a 501c3 nonprofit. Tax returns filed correctly. But the funding came through a complex network of cryptocurrency wallets and shell companies. She traced the money as far as she could. The trail led to the same dead ends she'd hit before, but the amounts matched, the timing matched, the methodology matched. Ethan Morales was funding Code for Change with stolen money, money taken from a casino that could afford the loss. He was using his ill-gotten fortune to help kids like himself. Kids who were brilliant but broken, kids who'd made mistakes, kids whom the system had failed. Chen sat in her hotel room staring at her laptop. She could open an investigation into Code for Change, shut it down, seize the funds, make a statement that crime doesn't pay. But what would that accomplish? The money was already stolen. The casino had been compensated by insurance, and Code for Change was doing genuine good, changing lives, giving opportunities to people who wouldn't have them otherwise. She thought about Ethan's message. Some people steal because they're greedy. Some steal because they're desperate. She thought about the embezzlers he'd exposed, career criminals with good jobs who stole for luxury, compared to a broke kid who'd stolen to survive and then used the money to help others. Was there a moral difference? Did intent matter? Did outcome matter? Chen didn't know. The law didn't make those distinctions. Theft was theft. Crime was crime. But she found herself hesitating, questioning, wondering if maybe justice wasn't as simple as she'd always believed. She closed her laptop without filing a report. She told herself she'd think about it, decide later. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. She never reported Code for Change, never opened an investigation. She told herself it was because she couldn't prove the connection, that the evidence was circumstantial, that she was prioritizing other cases. But the truth was simpler. She didn't want to shut it down, didn't want to be the person who destroyed something good to punish something bad. By June 2026, Code for Change had expanded to 5 cities. Over 200 students had graduated from their programs. Employment rates were above 80%. The organization had received local government grants and corporate sponsorships to supplement the anonymous donations. It was becoming self-sustaining. Even if Ethan's money dried up, the organization would survive. Chen kept monitoring it quietly. Not as an investigator, but as someone curious about whether stolen money could be transformed into something worthwhile. Meanwhile, the official investigation into Ethan Morales remained open but inactive. The FBI had moved on to more pressing cases. The Mirage Bay heist was 3 years old. The trail was cold. The suspect was in the wind. Some cases go unsolved. Some criminals never get caught. That's the reality of law enforcement. Chen accepted it, but she never forgot.